The works I chose for this show range from the very beginning of my career to the present, and they're chosen based on what I think has been important for my story, my evolution. There's a huge amount of brand new work in the show, works from the last 2 years, and I think it's great for the viewer to see the connection between my history and what I'm doing now, because my work is always about building, using some of the motifs, some of the concepts, and most of my concepts are about justice. So might be represented in different ways in different pieces, but it's about equality around race, around gender, around sexual orientation. It's about the environment, protecting the environment, fighting climate change. It's about questioning authority and abuse of power. Those themes are everywhere in the show and in many different manifestations. Also, music has been a very, very important part of my life, so there's a whole section on music. This moment in time where there's a lot of political division, I think it's more important for artists to take a stand about social issues, about politics, because art can really influence the way that people process big, important ideas. This is something that I've been doing for the majority of my career, inspired largely by music. Music is joyful, but it also, in its best form, can make you think about ideas. People like Bob Marley, The Clash, Public Enemy have been a big inspiration for me. But I think a lot of artists are afraid to speak out about social issues because they think that art is about decoration and escape, but it doesn't have to be. And I think that great art can have an aspect of joy and escapism and provocation all within the same piece. I chose the word obey as the main word in my work after seeing the film They Live by John Carpenter. It's one of many words that are used symbolically within the film, but obey stood out to me as the most powerful word, because obedience is something that we do subconsciously most often. There are forces that are trying to push us in different directions, and sometimes we don't even think about what we submit to. So seeing the word obey, making people confront consciously what they agree with and what they obey, was very, very powerful in my opinion. So I started to use that word not only in my artwork, but in my clothing line. But my clothing line is just an extension, an accessible extension of my art and my philosophy. We all choose what we want to wear every day, and a t-shirt is a walking art piece. The movie They Live was addressing Reagan's America in the 1980s, but in fact, Reagan's America was better than the America we have now. I always thought Reagan is the biggest villain. Then we had George Bush, who was a bigger villain, then Donald Trump, who's the biggest villain in the history of the United States. He wants to rip apart everything that's been important about pushing America forward in a way that promoted equality and opportunity. I feel like what's going on in the United States right now is very dangerous. We could lose democracy itself in the next election. So John Carpenter's idea that people haven't opened their eyes to the forces of manipulation and control is a concept that's really important for people to consider with what's going on now. There are a lot of politicians pushing for things that I think the public hasn't really understood how sinister they are. They use language about that's about fear and glory and things that impact people emotionally, but people need to see what the next step is. Think about it as what the true agenda underneath the language is. What I'd like to see for the future of art connected to activism is just more people taking the time to think about how their art could be used to shape social ideas, and having the courage to say something that some people might disagree with. I think that you see with social media, with memes, with TikTok videos, people expressing themselves, but art can go deeper because it can invite someone in to have a very personal internal experience with how they process it rather than just feeling like they're being yelled at. And even though I like my artwork to be easily understood, I also like to give the viewer space to process it on their own terms. So I think more art that functions that way will help people to decide that they want to evolve on important issues and take a stand. I'd like to think I have a good relationship with Milan. This is my 4th trip here. I was part of a very big street art show called Urban Edge in 2005. I've been to Lake Como. I've put art up in the streets here. This is a cool city because it's got beautiful architecture, but it's not frozen in the past. The fashion of this city is always progressing. There's a lot of good graffiti. I think this is a cool city.